When God created the heavens and the earth, both were perfect. And then our grandparents, Adam and Eve, sinned, and God punished them and their descendants by cursing the earth. Ever since then, the earth has been a difficult place in which to live, and what we're going through now is just another example of that. Now, some of the difficulties of living in a cursed world are obvious. For example, life is difficult because we have to struggle to survive. Food, clothing, shelter, transportation require effort on somebody's part. Life is difficult because we have bodies that are weak and racked with diseases, and some of you young folks out there have no idea. When I was your age, I sort of imagined it, but not really. Life is difficult because family members and friends and neighbors are sometimes unpleasant and painful to live with. Now, these are the obvious difficulties of living in a cursed world. There is, however, another difficulty of living in a cursed world that is particular to Christians, and that is the difficulty of living in a culture where wickedness reigns and righteousness is despised. And unfortunately, that has become the culture in which we now live. We do, in fact, live in a culture where wickedness reigns and righteousness is despised. For example, in our country, we see the reign of wickedness and the rejection of righteousness in the laws permitting abortion, laws that have permitted and led to the brutal murder of more than 60 million babies since 1973, and that's real. Sometimes it's a statistic that seems to slide off our minds. That's real, and it's vile and horrible. We see the reign of wickedness and the rejection of righteousness in school curriculums that demand that we teach evolution but prohibit the teaching of creationism. And incidentally, God says that the creation is the greatest single visible, tangible evidence of His existence. So that's managed to be eliminated. And not only do our schools promote teaching evolution and prohibit the teaching of creationism, many schools are now promoting homosexual and transgender agendas that stand in direct opposition to God's Word. And those courageous Christians who dare to stand up for God's standards on sexuality are accused of being hate mongers and bigots. The reign of wickedness and the rejection of righteousness permeates our society, and there's probably no place where it causes the Christian more pain than the reign of wickedness in our government. We do have one of the best governments in the history of the world. Yet, our political system is racked with wickedness, and all too often, the good politicians get the bad press and the scorn of the masses, while the bad politicians get the good press and the applause of the masses. It's difficult living in a world where wickedness reigns and righteousness is despised. And this is especially true for those Christians who genuinely care about right and wrong. For those Christians who genuinely care about right and wrong, living in a world where wickedness reigns and righteousness is despised is painful. And there's a lot of this kind of pain because our world is racked with wickedness. Even today, we see wickedness being played out on the streets of our cities where demonstrators are looting and burning and even killing, while governments are doing little to stop them, and in some cases, even applauding them. 3,000 years ago, Israel had a king named David. And David, like many of us, also hated the wickedness he saw in the world around him. And what particularly bugged King David was that the wicked men and women seemed to be doing so much better than the righteous men and women. But then, that's what you would expect in a society where wickedness reigns. To help us deal with the difficulties of living in a world that is filled with wickedness, God inspired David to write a psalm in which he tells us how we should live in a world where wickedness will continue to reign and righteousness will continue to be despised, and will do so until Jesus returns and makes things right. The psalm David wrote to help us with this problem is Psalm 37. And this is the psalm we will be looking at this morning. And one of the reasons why Psalm 37 is so important to us at this particular moment in history is because Psalm 37 is a message from God in which he tells us to not fret. To not fret about the threatening and wicked circumstances around us. Do not fret, do not fret, do not fret. God tells us in Psalm 37 3 times we're told to not fret. And to not fret because of the reign of wickedness in the world. 3 times in this 37th Psalm, David tells us to not fret when the bad guys win out over the good guys. And when wickedness wins out over righteousness. Don't fret about it. Don't fret about it. Don't fret about it. Psalm 37, verse 1. Do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of those who do wrong. Verse 7. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Verse 8. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. Do not fret, do not fret, do not fret. When David wrote that we should not fret when wickedness wins out over righteousness, he was telling his readers that when wicked men and women do well, we should not let it gnaw at us. We should not let it inflame us. We should not let it eat away at us. We should not let it make us envious. When David wrote that we should not fret when wickedness wins out over righteousness, he was telling us that we should not become so preoccupied with wickedness prevailing over righteousness that it devours our minds and our souls. Don't become obsessed with this problem. David was not, however, telling us that we should be indifferent to wickedness. God never tells us to be indifferent to wickedness. To the contrary, God repeatedly tells us to hate wickedness and evil. Psalm 97, you who love the Lord, hate evil. You didn't know there were a bunch of verses about hate in the Bible. Actually, there are. We should hate evil. We should hate wickedness. Isaiah 5:20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, but who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Amos 5, hate evil, love good, maintain justice in the courts. Romans 12:9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Now, obviously, God is not indifferent to wickedness and evil, and it is just as obvious that He does not want us to be indifferent to wickedness and evil. At the same time, however, God does not want us to become so upset with the wickedness that exists in the world that it consumes us and gnaws at us and inflames us and eats away at us and makes us envious. In Psalm 37, God tells us to not fret when wicked men succeed. In Psalm 37, God tells us that we should not let the successes of the wicked men gnaw at us and eat away at us. Should we hate wickedness? Yes, absolutely. He tells us to hate wickedness. Should we hate wickedness with a passion? Yes. But we should not let this anguish in our souls consume us. And it does some Christians. Some Christians are so consumed with the problems of the world, they never have time to look at Christ. Verse 1, do not fret. Verse 7, do not fret. Verse 8, do not fret. 3 times we're told to not fret. In verse 8, God tells us why we should not fret. And the reason we should not fret is because fretting only leads to evil. Verse 8. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. It only leads to evil. But he does give us the answer to this question in Psalm 73, where a psalmist named Asaph tells us that he almost fell into sin when he fretted about the wicked doing so well. It upset him so much he almost fell into evil. Or as he put it, when he envied the prosperity and the successes of the wicked. Psalm 73, verses 2 and 3. But as for me, my feet almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. Asaph went on to tell us the sort of sin he fell into when he envied the prosperity of the wicked, and the sin he fell into was that of sinful discouragement. Fretting can lead to sinful discouragement. And Asaph found himself falling into this sin when he started to believe that there was no real benefit in living a righteous life and struggling to be light in a dark world. Because the wicked always seem to be doing so much better than the righteous, so why try to be righteous? Asaph was starting to believe that his efforts at living a righteous life had been a waste. Asaph was starting to believe that his life of righteousness was giving him mountains and mountains of grief and pain, while at the same time the wicked were living easy and comfortable lives. Asaph wrote, "Did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain." The danger of fretting over the wickedness that reigns in this world is that we become discouraged in trying to live righteous lives and in being light in a dark world. We start to believe that living a righteous life and being light in a dark world is pointless. When we become consumed with the successes of the wicked and the failures of the righteous, Satan and his earthly kingdom will seem to be big and powerful and successful, while God and his kingdom will seem to be small and weak and a failure. This is, of course, a lie. But if you focus all of your attention on the successes of Satan and the weaknesses with which the wickedness with which he has filled the world, pretty soon this is all you'll see. And this in turn will lead you to become discouraged in trying to be light in a dark world. Do not fret. Do not fret when the wicked succeed. Why does God tell us 3 times in this psalm to not fret when the wicked succeeds? He tells us to not fret because it only leads to evil. We will become discouraged and embrace a lie. Verse 8. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. By now, most of us can see that fretting over the wickedness that reigns in the world can be dangerous. By now, most of us can see that allowing the world's wickedness to gnaw at us and eat us up will only lead to sinful behavior. But, we ask ourselves, what can we do to avoid fretting? What can we do? The overwhelming success of the wicked at the expense of the righteous is hard to take. It's hard to look out into the world and see that the wicked always seem to prevail and the righteous seem to always lose. This being the case, how can we avoid becoming consumed with rage over a world that is so outrageously sinful and outrageously cruel to the righteous? How do we deal with that? Or to put it simply, what can we do to avoid fretting? That's a message to me as much as you. Very easy to fret. In fact, I would argue that it's very hard not to fret when you look at the world around you and see how the righteous are treated as opposed to the wicked. Now, David offers two answers to this question of how we manage to avoid fretting. And the first thing he says to do is to look ahead to the destiny of the wicked. The first thing we need to do in dealing with the tendency to fret is to look ahead to the destiny of the wicked. And if we do that, we will find that their destiny is horrible. And if their destiny is horrible, why fret over their temporary successes? Verses 1 and 2. Do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. In other words, they just won't be here that much longer. Psalm 37, verses 9 and 10. For evil men will be cut off, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. Verses 12 and 13. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming, sooner than many thought. To avoid becoming consumed with rage over a world that is so outrageously sinful, God tells us to look ahead to the destiny of the wicked. And if you do that, you will find that their destiny is horrible. And if their destiny is horrible, why fret over their temporary successes? The second thing David tells us to do to avoid fretting over a world where wickedness reigns is to take our eyes off of the wicked and look up to God. Take your eyes off of the wicked and look up to God. David tells us four ways in which we should look up to God. The first way we should look up to God is to look up to God in trust. Verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Trust me, God is saying to me. Trust me when I tell you that the wicked will wither like the grass and fade away. Trust me when I tell you that the wicked will soon be no more. Trust me when I tell you that the destiny of the wicked is horrible and the destiny of the righteous is wonderful. Trust me. I got your cover. Or as they say in film, I've got your back. I've been watching too many cop shows, obviously. The second way we should look up to God is to look up to God in delight. Verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. God is saying, in effect, don't become obsessed with the idiocy of this world. Instead, become obsessed with me. Rather than focusing on a world gone mad, focus instead on the one who will one day clean up this mess and usher in righteousness and sanity. Find your pleasure in me, God tells us. Find your pleasure in me. The third way we should look up to God is to look up to God in commitment. Verse 5, commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him, and he will help you. What the psalmist is telling us in this verse is this. We need to take all of the anguish and fretting we are plagued with and give it to God. He can take care of it. Peter may well have been thinking of this verse when he wrote, cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. He really, really cares for you. The fourth way we should look up to God is to look up to God in patience. Verse 7, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. The psalmist is telling us in this verse to relax. Just relax. God is in charge, and he has everything under control. In time, he will cast out the wicked and usher in the reign of righteousness. And when that time comes, there will be no more wickedness to fret about. Because, as Isaiah put it in chapter 11, verse 9, they will neither harm nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That day's coming, folks, and that's our destiny. And that's the final chapter, the unending final chapter. Peace, prosperity, this temporary setback won't last. It's only temporary, so don't fret. It's difficult living in a fallen and cursed world. It is. It is difficult not only because we have to struggle to survive, but also because we have to live in a world filled with wickedness and we hate it. To help us deal with the difficulties of living in a world that is filled with wickedness, God inspired David to write the 37th Psalm, a psalm in which he tells us how we can live in this wicked world and not become its victims. In this wonderful psalm, David tells us to not fret because of the wickedness in the world, because fretting only leads to evil. Instead of fretting, God tells us to keep in mind that the destiny of the wicked is horrible and their successes here on earth will soon be over. And rather than focusing on the wicked, focus on God, who will one day do away with all wickedness and give us a perfectly righteous world, a world of unending joy, of unending righteousness, of unending right over wrong. In fact, no wrong at all. That's our destiny, thanks to Jesus Christ. And people wonder why we worship him. It should be obvious why we worship him. I don't want that mess out there, neither do you. That's not our destiny, folks. Focus on the Lord. Focus on the Lord. Do not fret because of evil men, but be envious of those who do wrong. For like grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. That's their destiny, not ours. Father, thank you for giving us a glorious destiny, a glorious future, one in which we won't have to put up with this idiocy any longer. Thank you for giving us hearts that recognize that the world we live in is filled with sinful idiocy as well. We're no better than the folks in the street, but because of Jesus Christ, you've cleansed our minds and given us a new way to think, and we thank you for that. Now I pray you'll give all my brothers and sisters a good week. Help us to focus our attention on you and not fret. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.